This was my first job after moving into my own apartment, a small two-bedroom unit just a few streets away from the small Pizza Hut branch in the quiet town of Shadeville. I was 18 years old, trying to balance my college classes during the day and working in the evenings to pay the rent. The store wasn't fancy, but it was always busy, especially on weekends. The owner, Nathan Edward, was a middle-aged man with a heavy accent and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. His nephew, Ethan Edward, worked at the front desk and sometimes helped with deliveries, while another young man named Ryan was in charge of the kitchen. Being the only girl in the entire place felt strange at first, but I eventually got used to it. On my first day, Nathan handed me a red Pizza Hut shirt and pointed toward the back, saying, "Wear it there." I looked around and asked, "Is there a bathroom I can use?" He paused for a moment, then pointed to the large fridge and said, "You can change there, it's private." A strange feeling tugged at my stomach, but I said, "I'll use the bathroom, thanks." He gave a half smile and said, "As you wish." In the following weeks, Nathan began asking personal questions. One evening, while I was folding pizza boxes, he approached and asked, "Do you live alone?" I hesitated before answering, "No, I have a roommate." He laughed lightly and said, "No, you live alone." The way he said it made me uneasy, but I tried to act normal. From that day on, I felt like Nathan was always watching me, whether I was washing dishes, preparing orders, or even during deliveries. He began insisting on joining me during deliveries, sitting in the passenger seat and giving unnecessary directions. One night, he said, "You're doing well, but you need to relax more." His tone was suspicious, as if there was a hidden meaning behind his words. Then came the more disturbing questions. "Do you have a boyfriend?" he asked, looking at me with a strange interest. I lied and said, "Yes, but he lives out of state." I thought this lie would make him back off, but it didn't. One night after the shift ended, Nathan asked me to help him take out the trash. I followed him into the back alley, where the lighting was dim and the streets were empty. As I was placing the trash bag down, he turned toward me and said, "You know, you should be careful. You're young and live alone, anything can happen." His tone scared me, but he continued, "I know the layout of your apartment. I have a friend who lives in the same building." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never told anyone at work where I lived. A cold wave of fear washed over me as his words sank in. He continued, "You should always make sure your windows are closed. You never know who might be watching you." That night I couldn't sleep. The next day I decided to quit. I knew I couldn't continue working there. When I told Nathan I was leaving, he didn't show much of a reaction, but he said with a faint smile, "You'll miss working here." Shortly after I left, I heard that Nathan had a criminal record, and there were multiple complaints and restraining orders against him from women who had worked with him before. I felt relieved that I had trusted my instincts and quit before things escalated. A few weeks later, the Pizza Hut branch was closed down entirely. To this day, I can't look at the Pizza Hut logo or hear its name without feeling a chill. Though that chapter of my life was brief, it left an indelible mark on me, teaching me the importance of trusting my instincts and prior. In a small town in Texas, there was a Pizza Hut branch known as Elm Street Pizza Hut. The restaurant had been operating for many years and was a quiet, cozy spot for families. However, in recent years, employees began noticing strange occurrences after the restaurant closed. One hot summer night, Amy, the restaurant manager, was closing up after a long day. She was the last employee left, and as she turned off the lights, she noticed a man sitting in the back corner of the restaurant. He was wearing a long black coat and his face was hidden under a black hat. Amy approached him and said, "Excuse me, we're closed." But the man didn't respond. As she got closer, she noticed that the table in front of him was completely empty, as if he hadn't ordered anything. Suddenly, the room felt unnaturally cold, and a strange, musty smell filled the air. She tried speaking to him again, but he vanished into thin air. After that incident, employees began noticing the mysterious man appearing late at night. He always sat at the same table and never ordered anything. Every time an employee tried to approach him, he would disappear without a trace. Fear began to creep into the hearts of the staff, and they started wondering, who is this man? And why does he keep showing up? Amy decided to dig into the restaurant's history to see if there were any strange events connected to it. She discovered that the restaurant was built on the site of an old warehouse that had burned down in a massive fire 40 years ago. In that fire, a man had died after being trapped inside. Survivors described the man as wearing a long black coat and a black hat. One night, Amy decided to stay after closing to confront the mysterious man. She sat in the restaurant and waited. At midnight, the man appeared again at the same table. This time, Amy decided to speak to him directly. She said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The man slowly lifted his head, revealing a pale face and pitch-black eyes. In a faint voice, he said, "I want pizza, but no one can help me." Then he began to laugh, a chilling, echoing laugh, and the lights went out completely. When the power came back on, the man was gone, but the table was covered in old burn marks. Since that day, Amy has been too afraid to stay in the restaurant after closing, but the mysterious man still appears from time to time, sitting at the same table. It's said that he is the spirit of the man who died in the fire, still searching for something. Or perhaps waiting for someone to help him. The legend of the customer who never leaves has become a chilling tale whispered among the town's residents, and the Elm Street Pizza Hut remains a place where the past and present collide in the most terrifying way. In the small town of Valencica, located in the heart of Texas, lived Sarah, a single mother working at a Pizza Hut. Sarah, in her 30s, had a calm demeanor, but her eyes carried a lot of pain and sorrow. Her husband passed away 2 years ago in a tragic car accident, and since then, Sarah had been trying her best to rebuild her life for herself and her 7-year-old twin children, Adam and Layla. One evening, while Sarah was bringing orders to the tables, an elderly man named Mr. Harold entered the restaurant. He wore an old, worn-out coat and dark sunglasses, even though it was nighttime. His walk was peculiar, almost as if he were staggering, even though he appeared to be in full physical and mental health. He sat in the dim corner of the restaurant where the lighting barely reached, and his hands trembled slightly as he picked up the menu. What caught Sarah's attention was his inability to focus. His eyes were unnaturally bright, and he stared at her in a way that made her feel uneasy. He didn't speak in complete sentences, but instead whispered to himself in a low voice, though she could hear him clearly. "You're here. You weren't supposed to be here. Don't tell them. Don't let them know." He murmured words that made no sense as he ate his meal. Sarah, who felt something was off, tried to brush it off, but her heart raced. As she collected the empty dishes, he leaned in and said quietly, "Your husband is here, but he's not what you think. He's here for the same reason." Before she could respond, Mr. Harold abruptly stood up, left the bill on the table, and quickly exited the restaurant without looking back. The air outside was cold, but Sarah felt an eerie chill in her heart as though everything around her had become shrouded in unease. When he left, her children Adam and Layla had just come in after playing outside. Upon seeing them, the man stared at them intensely and said softly, "You're part of the puzzle too. You'll see what you can't understand." Sarah, exhausted and troubled, tried to shake off the confusing thoughts swirling in her mind. Was this man just a crazy old man? Or was there something strange about this place? She started to suspect that the restaurant itself held a hidden secret. When she decided to investigate, she discovered that the Pizza Hut had been built on an old site, once the scene of several bizarre incidents. There were rumors about a spirit trapped underground, causing the strange occurrences. Could Mr. Harold be the answer? Or was this just the beginning of even more mystery? When I was 21 years old, I worked at a small Pizza Hut in a quiet town on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. The town wasn't big, but it had enough activity to keep us busy most nights. For me, the job was a way to earn some extra cash while attending community college. I lived in a small apartment with my roommate, which meant I didn't have many expenses, so I could save most of my paycheck. My days were simple: taking orders, prepping pizzas, cleaning the kitchen, and occasionally handling deliveries. Deliveries were my favorite part, driving my Honda Civic around town with music blasting, collecting tips, and escaping the heat of the kitchen. Most nights I'd take home between 60 AND 60 and 100 in tips on top of my hourly wage of $12, which wasn't bad for a college student. But I always knew there were risks. Delivering at night meant venturing into unfamiliar areas or rundown neighborhoods. I tried to stay cautious, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened one October night. It was a slow Thursday night. The dinner rush had passed, and it was just me, one of the kitchen guys, and our shift manager, Laura Smith. Laura was in the back doing inventory, and I was up front wiping down counters when the phone rang. "Thanks for calling Pizza Hut. This is Jake. How can I help you?" I said, grabbing a pen to jot down the order. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then a raspy voice said, "Jake, huh? Nice to finally talk to you." I froze. I didn't recognize the voice, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. What can I get for you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want a large pepperoni pizza," he said. "Extra cheese. Oh, and make sure it's you who delivers it." My heart skipped a beat. "We'll send whoever's available," I replied, keeping it professional. "Fine," he said. "I'll tip you $50. The address is 123 Shadow Lane. Don't forget the extra cheese." I scribbled down the order and hung up, feeling uneasy. Shadow Lane was on the outskirts of town, an area I'd only delivered to a couple of times. It was mostly farmland and old houses, the kind of place that got pitch black at night. Laura came up front and noticed the look on my face. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just a weird call," I said, handing her the order slip. "You want me to send Mike?" she asked, referring to the kitchen guy. I shook my head. Mike was just a kid, barely 17. If this was nothing, I didn't want to scare him off deliveries. "I'll handle it," I said, grabbing my car keys. The pizza took about 15 minutes to make, and I used the time to psych myself up. It's probably just some lonely guy who wants attention, I told myself. You'll drop the pizza, get your tip, and be done. I loaded the pizza into the thermal bag, grabbed a bottle of soda the guy had added last minute, and headed out. The drive to Shadow Lane was uneventful at first. The streets were empty, and the only sound was my car radio playing low. But the closer I got to the address, the darker it became. The streetlights ended and the road turned to gravel. My headlights illuminated thick trees on either side of the road, their branches swaying in the wind. Finally, I saw the house. It was a 2-story farmhouse, its white paint peeling and shutters hanging loose. The porch light was on, but the rest of the house was dark. I parked in the dirt driveway and sat in my car for a moment, debating whether to call the guy and tell him to meet me outside. "Come on, Jake," I muttered to myself. "It's just a delivery." I grabbed the pizza and soda and walked up to the porch. The wood creaked under my feet as I stepped closer to the door. Before I could knock, the door swung open. A man stood there, middle-aged, with greasy black hair and a dirty t-shirt that clung to his thin frame. "Jake," he said, grinning. "Right on time." I froze. He must have seen my name tag, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. Yeah. Your total is $23.50, I said, holding out the receipt. He didn't move. He just stared at me, his grin widening. "Has anyone ever told you you're brave, Jake? Doing this job, going to strangers' houses in the middle of the night?" I forced a laugh. "Not really." "Do you have the cash?" I asked again. "Oh, sure, come inside, I've got it in the kitchen." "No thanks," I said quickly. "You can just hand it to me here." His grin faltered for a moment, but then he stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. "Come on in, it's just right there." I didn't move. "Sir, if you don't have the money, I'll have to take the pizza back." That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned my head slightly and caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows near the side of the house. My heart started racing. "Look, I really need to get going," I said, backing away. "Leaving so soon?" the man said, his grin returning. "You didn't even get your tip." As I turned to head back to my car, 2 men emerged from the darkness. Both were wearing ski masks. One of them held a crowbar, and the other had what looked like a hunting knife. "Hey!" I shouted, dropping the pizza and bolting for my car. The man at the door lunged for me, but I dodged him, my adrenaline kicking into overdrive. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind me as I fumbled with my keys. I managed to unlock the door and dive into the driver's seat just as one of the masked men reached the car. He slammed the crowbar against the window, cracking the glass but not breaking it. I threw the car into reverse and floored it, tires kicking up gravel as I sped down the driveway. One of the men stepped into the path of my car, but I didn't stop. The car jolted as I hit him, sending him rolling over the hood before he landed on the ground. I didn't stop driving until I reached the Pizza Hut parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely take the keys out of the ignition. Laura ran out when she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything, from the creepy call to the men with masks. She called the police while I sat in the back trying to calm down. The cops went to the house, but when they arrived, it was empty. The porch light was off, and there was no sign of anyone living there. They found the pizza box I'd dropped and some footprints, but that was it. I quit the next day. To this day, I don't know who those men were or what they wanted, but I'm certain if I hadn't gotten out of there when I did, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. In a small town called Everin, located in the northern United States, there was an old restaurant named the Bridge of Shadows. The restaurant sat in a dark corner of the town, far from the bright lights and busy streets. Many of the townspeople avoided it, as strange rumors surrounded the place. The owner of the restaurant, Jacob, was a man in his 50s, eccentric and always appearing late at night. He rarely spoke to his customers, offering only a mysterious smile when they asked about the restaurant's name. He would simply say, "Everything has its shadows, even light." On a cold day in November, Elizabeth, a woman in her 30s, entered the restaurant after getting lost in the dark streets. She had recently moved to the town, seeking a fresh start after losing her husband in a mysterious accident. She felt lost and deeply sad, looking for a place to shelter. Elizabeth sat in a dark corner of the restaurant where no one could see her. The atmosphere inside was strange, as if time had stopped in this place. The chairs were worn out, the tables dusty, yet there was something about the place that made her feel an odd sense of safety. The waiter, dressed in an old uniform, led her to a solitary table and said softly, "You'll be here until the night passes, and everything will reveal itself to you." As she ate in silence, she noticed something odd in the mirror hanging on the wall. A figure appeared in its reflection, but when she looked to the actual spot, there was no one there. She felt confused but told herself the shadows in the room were likely the cause. Over time, the customers came and went, but Elizabeth was the only one left. The weight of the place began to grow heavier with every moment. Suddenly, she saw the shadows moving along the walls, as if they were watching her. There was something invisible hovering around her, something old and dark. Jacob suddenly approached her and said, "You weren't meant to be here, but now you're part of the place. You won't leave until you find what you're looking for." Elizabeth was stunned and didn't understand what he meant. Then she suddenly remembered the accident where she had lost her husband. She had been searching for something, but she didn't know what it was. The restaurant, which had no official history, seemed to hold answers to secrets buried long ago. But was Jacob hiding something more than just words? And would Elizabeth be able to escape this place that had become more than just a restaurant?